Hey, this is Aaron. Alright, so this is a little bit of a self-indulgent video here because it's not about metal at all, but this is one that I've kind of wanted to do for a while. This is going to be the Sun Ra records, and sort of the impetus is that there have been a couple recent reissues of a couple Sun Ra records that have been pretty tough to get. A couple unreleased sessions from the 70s, and then also one from the 60s that has a great reputation. I've been keeping an eye out for it for a long time, but not wanting to spend hundreds of bucks. So, yeah, there's a brand new one that just came in the mail today, which is the mailman saying, or I should say, the mailman is the prophet of God. It's like God saying, through his prophet, the mailman, it is time to show your Sun Ra records. So, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'd normally like to talk about the records. I'm actually going to really try and keep it to a minimum because this is going to be a long-ass video anyway. Normally, if I were going to show what I have by a certain band, I'd hold it up so you can see how thick the stack is, but I'm not even close to being able to pick this shit up. So, hopefully I'll get a kick at least out of the covers. If anyone is interested at all, I'd be happy to talk about this stuff in more detail. I love jazz, as anyone who's watching me probably knows, but I haven't really done many videos about it. So this is sort of the first foray. I'm going to keep it to a minimum, like I said, the chatter, but if anyone else out there is interested, then you can certainly pursue that a little bit further. But I'm still going to stick with the metal too, so you know, I got my priorities straight, don't get me wrong. I just love this shit too. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can, but we've always got time for a little bit of so to speak, and a little so to speak. And today I have the Reed's Spiced Apple Brew, which I think is sort of a special seasonal one here. But it is, I actually cheated and had one of these the other day. It was pretty tasty. Let's give it a crack though, because I don't really remember. Fuck it. It really kind of tastes like applesauce to me. I kind of thought that the other day. And that's kind of welcome because it tastes like a really good applesauce with a lot of seasoning in it and in liquid form. So it's like you just cut right past all that sort of like lumpy, weird applesauce shit, which is fine. I'm not hating on applesauce here, but you know, you put it into a beverage form and just absorb it right in and go, and it's kind of refreshing and shit. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be crying if I can't get these anymore in April, but I got a 4-pack of these, and I'm going to enjoy it. I already enjoyed the last. I'm going to enjoy this one and the other two. So that's that on that front. Actually, LJ, this is for you, if you see that. Sleek design. But, I won't say any more about that, except I need a little hair. So let's get to the records. As far as how these are organized, I personally, there's been all these sorts of like long convoluted discographies written. If you know anything about Sun Ra, well, you probably know he was out of his fucking tree. But if you know more than just the very base minimum about Sun Ra, I'm sure you probably know that his discographies are like impossible. There are tapes all over the place. Information was impossible to come by. He would do shit like put out a record on his private label, which was Saturn, that would have a session from the 50s on one side and a session from the 60s on the other side, just like a decade apart, just sort of slapped together like that. And people have gone and tried... Oh, and by the way, you can't rely on the information that's on the record jackets either, by the way, because that was, you know, the musicians are bad enough, but as far as recording dates, forget it. It's completely unreliable. So, people have tried to compile this stuff. Personally, I'm more interested in when the things actually came out than in you know, the recording dates and that more sort of like archivist thing. The sort of my record collector approach is kind of how I think of it. So I'm going to try and show these in as far as I've been able to ascertain the order that they would have been released. Obviously, most of these are reissues, but we're going to do that and we'll go through them. So the very first one, and yeah, it would be really cool to have an original on transition. But I have a Delmark reissue of Sun Song, which is, you know, pretty traditional, really, given his reputation. But it's the very first, and as such, it's a classic. This is Supersonic Jazz, which actually came out with a different cover as well, which I think is a cooler cover, but this one's pretty damn cool, too. And this is actually the first Saturn record, if I'm not mistaken, at least for Sun Ra music. There was some 45s by some doo-wop groups he produced and shit like that, but for just him putting out his own shit on his own labels, which in the 50s, which I find remarkable. That's it. So Jazz in Silhouette was another. I mean, this is kind of like the classic intro one. If you already like jazz, I think this is a very good intro record. But if you're new to jazz, I'd recommend something from later in his career. It's a great record, though. It has Saturn on it, which is one of my very favorite songs, as well as the earliest version I'm aware of Enlightenment. This is not an original because those are expensive, but this is a Japanese press of the futuristic sounds of Sun Ra. It was reissued on Savoy with a different title in France, and there's a recent reissue of it too that also has this cover, which I think is way cooler than that other one. When Sun Comes Out. It's a really good early 60s record. This is actually the one that I just got in the mail today. I haven't even cracked it yet, but I'm fucking so happy to finally hold in my hand a copy of Secrets of the Sun by Sun Ra. What I've heard off this record, I've loved. I haven't heard the whole thing yet. And by the way, just in case anyone's wondering, I have played all of these more than once. A couple of them I've only played maybe once, but almost all these I've listened to multiple times. I love these records. That's Art Forms of Dimensions Tomorrow. These covers are so awesome. This Fate in a Pleasant Mood. Most of these, by the way, are relatively easy to find, and I think they're even legitimate. Some of these, the provenance might be a little dubious, but I believe that these are actually licensed from the estates, these Saturns, which makes it a great time to live in from a Sun Ra standpoint, man, because you look at like Eckhart Jost's free jazz book from the early 70s, which is an important book as far as like articulating what free jazz is about, but you look at the chapter on Sun Ra and it's just so slight because it was based on the records that he could get in Europe in 1973, and they were basically the ESP records, which I actually think are kind of weak in the catalog, and then the futuristic sounds, then a couple others, and that's it. So he's like has this tiny little sliver of the puzzle that he's trying to write this assessment based on, and it shows. There's a favorite, the Nubians of Plutonia. A lot of these got reissued on Impulse in the early 70s as well. I have Saturns of all those. First of all, because they're cheaper, but second of all, I think the covers are cooler. I mean, look at that. That's Angels and Demons at Play. I mean, those Impulse covers are cool, but Jesus Christ. I mean, that record says, buy me, any way you slice it. And this was, in fact, one of the first ones I ever got. Frankly, years before I was actually ready to appreciate Sun Ra. This is the Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra, then on ESP, which came out in the mid-60s. It's probably one of the few that actually came out around the time it was produced. That's a reproduction of the original cover, although I think it did come out with this cover on ESP. There's a reissue, though, on Get Back. And like I said, these records are pretty highly regarded by some people, but that one, and then this one, which is the Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra, Part 2, where he's in company with Pythagoras and Copernicus and Leonardo and Galileo and Tycho Brahe, who had a gold nose, if y'all didn't know. That's a little fun fact about Tycho Brahe. Anyway, as far as free jazz stuff goes, they just feel a little bit, a little, I don't want to say slapdash, because especially when you're talking about Sun Ra, that isn't really all that appropriate, because his shit was anything but slapdash, but it just feels forced. It doesn't feel as spontaneous as most of his other records when they were just at home in their own studio, in their practice space, making great records like The Magic City. Having trouble holding this straight. That's an awesome record. Oh, shit, I gotta keep these straight or else I'll never get them put away. This is another pretty far out one. This is Other Planes of There. It's a cool record. I like this one better than the Heliocentric Worlds, but this is another one that feels a little bit more like they're sort of pushing to me. It has a whole sidelong track on it that was kind of uncharacteristic for that band, really. I really feel like they were most in their element when they were doing 6 to 8 minute songs and sort of stretching out within that paradigm, or within that model, within that time frame, but still sort of bringing that the freedom to the music without sort of saying, okay, we're going to spend 20 minutes here just improvising, This is actually some very early recordings, but this was actually came out in the second half of the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. This is, and take anything I say about this shit with a grain of salt, I'm doing the best I can, but sources are sparse. This is Sun Ra Visits Planet Earth, with Pat Patrick on a lot of these, by the way, who's the father of the sitting governor of Massachusetts. A little bit longer sitting, not much longer, but for a bit. Yeah, this, well, I won't go into all these. This is We Travel the Spaceways, a tune that I was humming when I left a show I went to seeing the orchestra. It was already after Sun Ra had died, but in the second half of the 90s, I saw the orchestra under Marshall Allen at the bottom of the hill in San Francisco. This is another one of my absolute favorites, Cosmic Tones for Mental Therapy. In fact, if I were going to say, here's one to sort of get the idea of what it's about as far as combining the freedom with the tunefulness, sort of the far-out just approach to it, the way the drums are used on this thing, and really just everything that Sun Ra was about encapsulated into one record, this would be pretty high on the list. So, anyway, this is absolutely one of my favorite out of all these. This is Interstellar Loways. Not a personal favorite, but still a solid 60s era Sun Ra record. This is Strange Strings, which is is pretty well known, but it was an experiment of, he gave his guys a bunch of stringed instruments and said, here, play these, this is going to be an exercise in ignorance. It kind of shows. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say, oh, that's a great, experimental thing, but it's a pretty weak Sun Ra record. It's cool that they did it, I can definitely dig that on some level, but given a choice between that and Cosmic Tones for Mental Therapy, it's no contest. This is the earliest that I have of just Sun Ra playing the piano. This is Monorails and Satellites. There's a volume 2 which hasn't been reissued and is rare as fuck. It took me a while to get into that record, but once I got into the right headspace, I really came to appreciate his playing. That's a really cool record. Now this is the other Delmark record. It actually came out in the late 60s, but these are 50s recordings too, and there's some overlap between this one and Sun Ra Visits Planet Earth. But to a fan like me, that hardly matters. As far as just balls out free jazz, this is probably the best one. Because this really sort of, as far as his whole concept of guided improvisation as opposed to just fucking going nuts, Archie Shepp or Pharoah Sanders or someone like that. I think this is the record where you really hear that. You play this next to an Archie Shepp record, and they're both great. I mean, I'm not slagging on him for a second here, but you can really sort of hear the Sun Ra aesthetic, the approach in that record in a way that you don't in some of the others. Here's the other ESP one. I've actually seen two different versions of this. This is a reissue, but one thing I like about this one is it has that shadow of the lamp in the background, like it kind of doesn't belong there. It's like a fucking desk lamp or something, so I get a kick out of that. This is actually another favorite one coming up here, and this is also a very recent reissue. I jumped for joy when they redid this one. This continuation. It's just another good one with all those pieces coming together, just that really distinctive sound, and still a really listenable record. I'm starting to feel like I'm repeating myself, but this is another one of my fucking favorites. So another one that took me a little bit while to get into. It's a smaller group than you usually have. John Gilmore, who's usually a sax player, is playing drums on a lot of these songs, although he did on a lot of the records. But the sound of Sun Ra's Roxachord is just awesome. What's the song? Love in Outer Space, the very last song on here, is just one of my favorite things ever. Night of the Purple Moon, that was, actually. I'm trying to say the titles as I go through and not go too fast, but that is Sun Ra, the Night of the Purple Moon. Holiday for Soul Dance, I think it's one of his weaker records. Sorry. It's okay. It's a lot of standards on this one, actually. One thing about him is he was into the... he sort of came up through that, and Fletcher Henderson's group and all that sort of thing. And just, frankly, being so old. He was in his 40s making most of these records. And, he lived for another 40 years. But when he's doing these standards, even though I kind of appreciate... I like that kind of jazz, that's cool, but that's not what I go to Sun Ra for. You know what I'm saying? Similarly to this one, actually. This one even has a singer on a couple of them. Sound Sun Pleasure. And apparently these both came out in the early 70s, by the way. Even though they're very early recordings. Also 50s stuff. Look at that picture, though. But it doesn't live up to that picture. This is just an awesome thing, but it's a lot of standards. A couple of these even have a singer on them, which is just surprising, from this kind of music. Now we're back to the greatness here with My Brother the Wind, which, it has Sun-Ra's credit as playing 2 Moog synthesizers. Not just one, but 2. There you go. He's actually an early adopter of that shit, too. I heard that he, made friends with the dude, and, it's like, hey, man, hook me up with one of your synths, because I'll totally play it on my records, and everyone else will want one, too. And I don't know if it quite panned out that way, but I love what Sun-Ra does with that shit on both of these records. This is My Brother the Wind, Volume 2. This is one of the ones that was actually that Ekkehard Yost had access to. It's After the End of the World. It's a live record from the Donaueschingen Festival. And this one is kind of suffers a little bit from kind of how it's spliced and chopped up. It kind of doesn't build to the climax that you're expecting in a way. It's a little bit of a disappointing record, but I'm not going to hate on it. I will say though that for 70s Sun-Ra live records, it pales in comparison to this one, which is I gotta bust out the French, Nuit de la Fondation Mate, and that's volume 1. This is awesome. Side 2, now this is where a long one does work. It's basically just Sun-Ra playing a Moog for 20 minutes and just freaking out, and just that space age shit. This is actually one of the ones I'd recommend too for coming on it from rock, because it has the electronic thing going on. It's definitely far out, and it's going to push you harder than a Genesis record. But if you're already into prog rock, it won't be an unfamiliar sound fundamentally. And then the version of Enlightenment on this actually has vocals on it which enhance it, believe it or not. It's funny, what I was saying before about the singer, that wasn't June Tyson. When it's June Tyson, that's a different story. She's always welcome, as far as I'm concerned, because she's awesome. But that other dude, I don't know. Fine singer, just doesn't seem to fit. Anyway, it starts out with a really tuneful song, then it sort of builds up, and then that sort of climactic, Moog solo. I think this is an easier entree if you're into rock. So let me show that cover one more time for that reason. There are actually 2 volumes of that. This is Nuit de la Fondation Mate, Volume 2. I don't know if any native French speakers are listening, I apologize. There were 2 records on the big Actuel label, which I also kind of collect, actually. I've tried to find just about everything in this series, but my Sun-Ra's, of course, have a special place. This one's fantastic. Actually, both these are really good. Definitely on the free end of the spectrum, but again, they don't sort of go off the deep end. It's not even the deep end. It's all I can think of is that cliche about telling someone to take a long walk off a short pier. It's like on these 2 records, he walks to the end of the short pier and is comfortable there and dips his feet in the water, and you're happy. On the ESP ones, he just kind of keeps walking, and you're like, what the fuck, man? So anyway, there was a record store day release last year that looked really cool. It kind of looked like the cover had a pharaoh headdress with star sunglasses. It kind of reminded me of that shit that ZZ Top was doing around Afterburner, actually, with all that, with the fucking pharaoh with the shades and shit. But that was actually a reissue of this record, which is on the Black Lion label. There's Pictures of Infinity. And it's good. I think this is right about the middle of the spectrum as far as Sun-Ra quality goes. It would have been one I'd pick to do a big deluxe release on, though. This one would have been, because this one's fucking fantastic. This is now into the 70s on the Saturn records now. This is Universe in Blue. And I just love this record. As far as June Tyson being awesome, Black Man is one of the best songs ever written. And just the delivery is so cool. This is earlier recordings again. This is Bad and Beautiful. I think these are early 60s recordings that got released around 70. Yeah, it says 72 on the back of this thing. That's probably about the time it came out. There's another really cool one that kind of goes in a different direction again. The cover, I don't know if you'll really be able to see that. Let me take it out. You can kind of see it when the light hits it just right. This is the Antique Blacks. This actually has a lot of narration on it by Sun Ra, but it hangs together. He made... They're like those records of his where he like reads poems and shit that have come out on Norton. I have to admit I haven't really investigated those in a lot of depth. But I've been a little bit afraid of them because I'm really into it for the music. And, the concept is cool to the degree that, whatever it takes, I mean, if he's a cokehead and he makes great records because he loves coke so much, I'll take that. If he's all into space and like pharaohs and shit like that, and he makes great records because that's his deal, it's probably even healthier for him, but I'll take that anyway. I mean, it's not like I know the dude personally, right? So, whatever as far as that goes. But it's not really what I go to the records for, you know what I mean? To hear him, like, recite poems. Don't get me started on Jim Morrison. I'm talking about an overrated piece of shit. But this record hangs together. It has the narration, it has the story, and sort of the concept. It doesn't make any bones about it, but it still, like, stands on its musical merits. It doesn't take away from it at all that, like, there's this sort of message going along. And in fact, it has some of my favorite songs, actually. Like, this song is dedicated to nature's God. It's fucking fantastic. That's a standout record for synth sounds, too. Okay, this is one of the 2 Impulse ones that I own. This is Astro Black. And, can you see it actually has Sun Ra on it? Kind of looking stupid. It's not a very good cover. But, when they did the deal with Impulse, there were, they made 2 records that actually came out. They recorded a few others that stayed unreleased until they're starting to trickle out, actually, just within the last few years. And then they reissued a bunch of Saturns. So where I've been able to, I've gotten the Saturns on the other ones. I got Impulses on the Impulse ones. And then I've tried to get the reissues, obviously, too. This is Space is the Place. And it actually goes like that. This is actually a record in its own right. There's also a soundtrack to Space is the Place, which accompanies the movie. But this is just a record where, they use that. This is actually on the Blue Thumb label, same as the second Captain Beefheart record. Oh shit, and I'm mixing all these up, damn it. Okay, let me fix this, or else I'm going to really be bummed later. Oh shit, I just fucked it up worse, god damn it. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is a good one too. This is another Saturn from the 70s. This is Discipline 27-2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. This is actually an older reissue. I think the legitimacy of this one's a little questionable. There's also just got a reissue along with Secrets of the Suns, so this one has gotten easier to get again. I don't know why someone would pick one out of all of them and do it, but... anyway, that's an awesome record, though. Just so good. That Discipline one. This is another favorite out of his live ones. This is live in Paris, live at the Gibbous. And this is a single record. This has a lot of Moog stuff on it again, which I have a real soft spot for. I could listen to him playing a fucking Moog all day long. Recorded in 1973. This is my other Impulse one. This is Pathways to Unknown Worlds. It's another kind of stupid cover. You'd think out of all the artists, given how many great covers Impulse did, what the fuck were they doing that for on Sun Ra's records? I could actually answer that question. It's because they had changed ownership a couple times by the early 70s. It was, Coltrane had been dead for like 7 years, and they didn't have, Bob Thiele and guys like that who were sort of leaving that shit. They sort of made some corporate decisions that weren't as good. But the hell with that's not the point of this. This is Cosmos. It's a good record on the Inner City label, which is a pretty decent jazz label anyway. I found a Niels Henning Ørsted Peterson record on Inner City that I really liked a lot. And I'm spacing what it was. There's another one that I got that I wasn't expecting to like and ended up liking a lot. So the label I'm going to start hunting out. It's an okay record. It's not a favorite. This one is actually one of 2 records on Paul Bley's label that were just solo piano records. Hell of a jazz musician in his own right, French-Canadian. Apparently he felt that Sun Ra's playing was underrated, and so he's like his just straight playing as opposed to shit with the orchestra and with small groups, which is most of what he did. So when he started his improvising artists label, he put out 2 Sun Ra records that was just solo piano. And that is one. And this is the other one. Honestly, neither one of these is a favorite. Monorails and Satellites, I'd take over either of these. But there's certainly nothing wrong with them. This is the other Inner City record, Live at Montreux. This one's a double. A bit long. I think the single records tend to hang together better than the doubles. The doubles tend to have more kind of meandering where they lose focus. But I'm such a fan, dude. It doesn't even fucking matter. And actually, in about 20 seconds, I'm going to contradict that, okay? Because this is another favorite, and this is a single. This is actually the last of the Chicago Saturns. So after this, that are the Philadelphia Saturns, which are even more of a disaster as far as tracking history or anything like that. This has a really weird piece on it on the first side, which is just like about half of it is just 2 flutes playing. And it doesn't sound like much. If you told me that, I'd be like, man, it sounds fucking lame. But it's awesome, man. It just sounds, it's so weird. And like the tones like clash in these weird ways in the Overtone series. It's just unbelievable. This is really an awesome record. Then he spent some time in Italy and made 3 records for the Horo label. And all 3 of these are doubles, actually. So that's why I'm going back on it, because these are really good. This is Unity, which is a really good record. And this one, Other Voices, Other Blues, is awesome. Featuring John Gilmore. Now, this one's just with a quartet. And this record is fucking fantastic. And this is a 2-record set of Sun Ra's. I can play all the way through and not even think about getting bored. In fact, I can play that one all the way through and reach for another one, which is New Steps. Now, this one's even better than that one. I fucking love both these records. Okay, so now we're getting into the Philadelphia Saturns. And so these are mostly Art Yard reissues. Some of them are in conjunction with Kindred Spirits. This one is Media Dreams. And that's their cover, because Art Yard redid these covers, because where they had covers, they were hand-drawn or whatever else, labels falling off. This is Disco 3000. This may be the only record I own that has real drums and a drum machine on the same tune. Talk about using the drum machine as like an actual instrument in its own right instead of just to mimic a drummer. God, I wish more bands would do that, because I'll tell you, a drum machine sounds really fucking cool if you're not trying to replace like the physicality of real drums with it, and has to be heard to be believed. It's a great record. This one I actually bought as a bootleg, but I believe that this is my only real Saturn. This is a copy of the Sound Mirror, and the reason I believe this to be a real one is because I've looked and looked. First of all, I've not found any evidence of the existence of a bootleg of the Sound Mirror. And second of all, a lot of these just came like this in plain covers. This is totally blank and with blank labels, except on this side, if you can see that, it actually says Sound Mirror Sun Ra, just handwritten on there. So yeah, no track list, no information, nothing. I know there are a lot of them kicking around like this. Another thing they do sometimes is they'd fuck up the pressings. Like they'd press one side of the Sound Mirror on one side and one side of Disco 3000 on this other side of the same record, and sell that too. So forget about trying to get all this shit. I saw some documentary once where some clown, like, it might have been Thurston Moore actually, who should know better than to say something like this, but they were saying that like these sort of a record collector's dream, Sun Ra. I'd say it's more like a record collector's nightmare, because it's just fucking impossible. I mean, it's like actually, it's not like impossible like because they're so rare and there's so many. It's impossible because it's actually impossible, because like there are just too many fucking variations. So I don't know, man. Slang Quiddity, one of his most accessible records, very enjoyable record though. I'm not gonna say any shit about this one at all. And this is on this is one of 2 for another different label. Philly Jazz was this one. And there was one a couple years later also on Philly Jazz. This might be a really good intro record too if you're sort of not used to the jazz sound. This is the closest you ever got to fusion, probably. I wouldn't call it a fusion record, but as far as that sort of vibe that you associate with fusion more than the actual whatever. That's probably the closest there is. Sleeping Beauty. Another good record. This is Sun Ra's disco record, believe it or not. At least it has a reputation for being that. It's really more like a funk record, man. You fucking listen to UFO off this one, and I'll put that up against anything that Funkadelic was doing in the second half of the 70s. No shit. No bullshit. And I've listened to those Funkadelic records and those Parliament records and played them a lot, so this isn't just like... It isn't like fucking when Robert Christgau says Judas Priest sounds just like Warmed Over Led Zeppelin or something like that. Where you listen to this, where if you actually know either band, you're like, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. No, I'm telling you. This is a really cool record though, man. It's fucking Philadelphia era. Kind of corny, really, by his standards. But a really enjoyable record anyway, man. It really is. Now we're getting close to 1980 here now. This is The Other Side of the Sun. This is the other Philly jazz record of Mythic Worlds. This one was on the Hat Hut label, I believe out of Switzerland. This is another double that's kind of meandering, I think. Sunrise in Different Dimensions. There's also an edition of this that came out in a box. This is another one with the kind of Moog freakouts I love. Beyond the Purple Star Zone. There's another art yard. There was a Saturn from the early 80s. Maybe 80-ish, actually. Like 80. I could be wrong, though. This is Strange Celestial Road. It's a cool record, but it kind of sounds like they're getting a little bit old, I think. Quite honestly. It just feels like they're slowing down a little. But then he busts out the fucking organ on Hiroshima, which I think is like 84 or something like that. It's unbelievable, man. This is an awesome record. I listen to this. I don't really care for the later Sun Ra. Like, he got more conservative, right, pretty close to his death. And, you know, in the late 80s and that sort of stuff, he started doing more and more standards. They did that whole Disney tribute thing. And, you know, I get it, actually. I kind of appreciate that in a way because it makes sense given his whole sort of out there, like, fantasy thing. But I don't need to hear Whistle While You Work, even if it's Sun Ra doing it. I'm sorry, you know? I'm not 12 anymore, and I heard that song enough times to last me a lifetime, you know? But this record then comes along from 84 and blows my mind. And I'll tell you which other one I really liked was this one. Hours After on the Black Saint label out of Italy. I think it's Black Saint. Yeah, it's a Black Saint. You know, again, he's starting to look pretty fucking old on this. And, you know, you can kind of hear that, but it's still a really quality record. So that is the last one that I have chronologically. The last few are ones that are sort of out of sequence. They're released afterwards that were either unreleased recordings or things that I picked up for some other reason. This is a weird issue of Symbols, which was one of the unreleased Impulse records. Fucking fantastic. This is on some little label. I can't remember the name of it. It doesn't say it on here, so I can't tell you right now. But there's actually a paste-on cover, kind of true to the original. And on the inside, it's just got that on the label. And on the other side, some information. But total, like, DIY job. I think you'd be proud. And I don't think they pressed more than a couple hundred of these. I want to say 200, but I felt very lucky to find one of these from a dealer in Denmark. So, if you're watching, dude, thank you. This one came out on Get Back, so I don't know if this is recorded for ESP or what. But, well, it's from 73, so it's a little bit late. But this is a really cool record. This concert, the concert for the Comet Kohoutek, is fantastic. Yeah, I dug the hell out of this record. This one is from last year. No, it's from earlier this year. On the Roratorio label. Other Strange Worlds. This is actually stuff from the Strange String Sessions, but only with a quartet instead of with the whole orchestra. It's okay. It's cool. It's kind of a fun record, but I think it falls a little flat for the same reason that Strange Strings does, but I had to have it anyway because I'm a fan. This one also came out earlier this year. This is actually his very earliest recordings that I'm aware of the existence of. This is a church organ recordings from 1948. That's what it's called, Sun Ra Church Organ, 1948. And the last one, which came in the mail 2 days ago, and is actually still sealed too, is another Impulse section that Roratorio just reissued, called Sign of the Myth. So that's it. That's just shy of 70 records that I own by Sun Ra. So yeah, I'm a little bit obsessed, but I don't even shy about that, because I'm not obsessed because I'm just like fucking obsessed. I'm obsessed because he's that fucking good, and these records are that fucking good. So if you've hung with me this far, awesome. Thanks for watching. Till next time.